Hello everybody. My name's Dan. I can't work out whether I'm nervous because I'm talking to you or because I'm in a church. I keep thinking about everything I've done wrong recently. I am very happy to be here though. As I've intimated, I'm not very good at this, so I'm going to get straight to the point. Hopefully what I've got to say is more important than how I say it. I want to talk to you about an opportunity to put millions of pounds of resources and funding into local VCSE organisations, but also failure, and the failure of local government to fully, I stress to fully, realise that opportunity. I'm here to share information, but then it's really about kind of throwing that challenge back to the local CVS. So we all know the situation financially that the sector is in. We've already heard people talking about what's been happening over the last kind of 10 years or so. And I remember watching a documentary about Black Dread. Did anyone see that? It's about a Rastafarian based in Brixton, and people have got their opinions on how Blacker came across. But one thing he did say was that this decade is the decade that they'll look back on where they'll say that a lot of kids and young people were cut adrift because of the cuts in services. And it's not a great time at the moment. People are feeling less welcome in our communities. People feel that they can't access basic social care services. Newcomers are no longer feeling welcome. And people are feeling that, then it's likely that, you know, people are at breaking point. So I told you this would happen. So there's a law called the Social Value Act, and I'm sure that many of you have come across this before. Now, what this act does, it allows government to leverage its spending. Okay? So essentially, every time government spends any money on the private sector, it can ask that private sector supplier to create benefits for local communities. Okay? So what this means, every single time government spends money, the local VCS organisation should be able to benefit from resources or from some kind of opportunity. And so far this has been used for £25 billion worth of resources, which sounds like an awful lot of money to everybody in this room. But just consider that every single year government spends £268 billion on private sector suppliers. That's a mind-boggling amount of money. And these are private sector suppliers that are themselves making billions of pounds in profit from the public sector. So of that 25 billion, my organisation has helped government to create around 600 grand of resources for local VCSE organisations. And if you do the maths on that, that means that theoretically from 268 billion pounds, we're talking about around 6 billion in resources and funding for the VCSE sector, if all of that was leveraged. Of course, that's never going to be the case, but it just shows you the kind of sort of sums that we're talking about here. So we've done it. We know that it's true. We know that it works. I mean, it probably sounds too good to be true. So, you know, why isn't this happening all across the country? Well, it's happening in lots of places. I can see Mike here from Manchester, and I've heard Mike talk at great length about the work that's being done in Manchester, and you do see this all over the country, but it's not everywhere, and it should be everywhere. So why isn't it everywhere? Why isn't the Act being used in every single procurement? Now, there are some thresholds, so above certain amounts, or rather below certain amounts, the Act isn't applicable, but it's still a huge amount of spend where it's not being applied. Now, the legislation becomes mandatory from next summer. It begins to become mandatory from next summer. David Lidington announced a few weeks ago that they're going to start to make it so for central government contracts. But the direction of travel is clear. It's only going to be going one way. So why isn't it happening in local government? Again, I think it comes back to a point that was made a moment ago, which is around accountability. Because local government don't have to do it, it's not being done, in my opinion. Because they don't have to do it, they're not being marked on it. So they're not doing it. And the insanity of this situation is that with more resources in the VCSE sector, the easier and cheaper the lives are of local government, of councils. A better, a healthier, a stronger VCSE sector means less pressure on local government services. And yet, even with this policy instrument to hand, they still aren't using it because they're not being marked on it. So I'm going to finish off by really just throwing that challenge to you as local CVS organisations to put that pressure, to hold your council officers accountable, to put your councillors under the pressure to make them start to use the Social Value Act and the legislation and to see more resources going into your organisations. Thank you very much.